Do I slide off my board, take in a deep breath, and accept my place in Davy Jones's locker? I mean, that's got to be better than getting eaten by a shark, right? Allow me to tell you one of my near-death stories. Oh, this one's a doozy. So going back 5 years ago, I had a major injury on my right shoulder. My rotator cuff was completely mangled, and for 6 months I couldn't move my arm, basically. I was just tucked wing. During those 6 months, because I couldn't do anything, I was just doing a lot of watching stuff on TV and on YouTube and videos and whatnot. But I was a fanatical surfer at the time, so I'd spent 6 months watching Nathan Florence and Jamie getting psyched, basically. And then my local break decided it was going to have 3-foot perfect barrels. And I hadn't done any exercise on my arm for 6 months. None whatsoever, not so much even as a push-up. Sawing that perfect surf, I'm like, oh, I'm going to risk it for the biscuit. Got to get out there. So I grabbed my surfboard, do what I usually do. Go, okay, there's a rip. I'll just jump in the rip, paddle out, do a few duck dives, and paddle out off the rip. I hadn't surfed in 6 months. My board wasn't waxed properly, so I had no wax on the rails. So as I was paddling out, just my luck, a set was going to dump on my head. I'm like, okay, well, I'll get a bit of practice of duck diving. I go to duck dive, and I got rocked around as per usual, and I had no wax on the rail, so the board slipped out of my hands. And in doing so, sliding between my legs, it clipped my ankle, and there must have been a nick on the rail or something, because it gashed me quite good, a bit of blood. I looked down, saw some blood, went, okay, I'll get out the back and deal with it. So I duck dived a few more waves, and then I went out to the back, sat behind the breakers, and then I was sitting on my board looking at my ankle. Now, you may have forgotten that I mentioned it, and I sure as shit forgotten at the time, that I was in a rip I was supposed to paddle out of. But I didn't, because I was looking at my ankle. So now I'm looking up from my ankle and realising I'm so far out and stuck in this rip. So for the next 15 minutes, I'm frantically paddling trying to get out of this rip. But because I hadn't exercised in 6 months, I was completely knackered. So then I sat up and looked around, and I realised I was alone and there was no lifeguards, there was no one there to help me. I was screwed. So laid back down and started paddling. I would have been paddling for about 15-20 minutes at least. I still wasn't out of the rip. I was completely gassed out. And because my ankle was bleeding profusely at this stage, I noticed the water around me had started to bubble a little bit, and so I sat back up on my board, and I realised I had a school of bonito around me that had been stirred up by the blood coming out of my ankle, and now they're churning on the surface. And as usual, below Bonito and Taylor, there was big dark shadows. And so I'm like, oh shit. So I laid back down, tried frantically paddling for another 15 minutes, and I was getting nowhere. I was stuck. This school around me was bubbling more and more. Birds were starting to work above me. For the lack of a better word, I was totally fucked. So at which point I had the decision to make. Do I just lay on my board and just see what comes of this, or do I slide off my board, take in a deep breath, and accept my place in Davy Jones's locker? I mean, that's got to be better than getting eaten by a shark, right? So as I'm laying on my board, head on the side, bubbling away, I was about to slide off my board and just accept my fate. And then I hear this voice go, and a chuckling voice going, "You're fucked, mate." And I look up from my board, and there's this old fella. He would have been about 60 years old, shaved head, but you can see a little bit of silver stubble. And he was like this little nugget dude on a mal. I'm like, where the fuck did you come from? And he's like, oh mate, you're fucked, aren't you? I'm like, I am so fucked. So he put himself in risk to come out to get me. So to this day, I am so very grateful for this. He said to me, you're not going to like this, especially your honour's not going to like this, but I'm going to need you to grab a hold of my leg rope and I'll paddle you out of this. Ordinarily, surfers don't like doing this. That's acceptance of failure, and that's such a noob move. But I had no other option. It was either that or die. So I grabbed onto his leg rope and he helped paddle in. I tried to paddle as much as I could to help, but I was no use whatsoever. So this guy was an absolute champion. And then got to the point where we're at the breakers. I was able to just like push myself on, catch a bit of white water and wash up on beach. And I crawled up on beach, immediately spewed, and then rolled on my back and passed out for 10 minutes. When I came to, I looked around, I could not find that guy anywhere. I wanted to thank him. I've been looking for him every day ever since. Whenever in public, I look for him. Because if I see him, I'm buying him a case of beer at least. He's a dead set champion. I could never find him. But I learnt a lesson that day. Off-season training is a thing, do it. But yeah, that was another one of my near-death experiences. And I am so grateful for that Silver Surfer saving my ass that day. Well, rock on.